Hello, my friends. It's Mara Sievers, creator of Pilates Encyclopedia, and I am here with my very first Ask Me Anything on YouTube. So glad you're here with me. I sent out an email asking for your questions, and I got a huge response. So be prepared. This is going to take a while. So maybe you want to postpone listening to this when you're in the car and driving or something like that. But I will also put all the questions, a table of content with the questions into the comments below the video so that you do not have to sit through the whole video, but you can jump ahead to the question that is most interesting to you, or maybe the question that you submitted, and get your answer more quickly. And then so I guess without much further ado, let's jump right in. And I did not prepare a ton to answer these questions, so I might be, thinking this through in real time, which honestly, I find this sometimes really helpful when I watch other people because I learn how they think instead of just getting the answer of this is it. But I want to let you in a little bit in how I come to the answer that I'll give you. All right, so let's do it. Laure asks, how do I remember all of the rowing variations? So I'm still in the instructor learning stage and the various rowing variations are eluding me. Do you have any tips or pointers for keeping them all straight? They're just not clicking for me, especially when it seems like some of the versions have extra, almost pointless movements that made me giggle when I read it. And I totally agree. Even though there's no such thing in Pilates, meaning no such thing as pointless movements. Thanks for your offer to help, Laure. You're not wrong. I totally agree. And so the first thing that I do not know is which school you're training with, because that's the thing too. Every single school or method or style of Pilates has slightly different variations. And in one variation, the arm goes out to the side, and the other variation, the arm goes forward. So, OMG, how do you keep those straight in your head? So, to be honest, with all the rowing stuff, like even the naming is wrong, at least different, right? So some schools name them rowing one, rowing two, rowing three, rowing four. Two of those face forward, two of those face the other way. You know, I don't generally like just naming something like that because I'm very bad. So here's the thing. I'm very, very bad at memorization. My brain cannot memorize. Maybe it's my ADHD. I don't know what it is, but I have to have a reason behind it. I have to have some kind of a mental bridge. I need all the help I can get in remembering. So I feel you. I feel you, Laurie, right? So for me, I just started to rename them. And in the membership in the Pilates Encyclopedia, I do not call them rowing one, two, three, four. I call them rowing facing front and rowing facing back. So because that is the biggest difference initially. Two are facing forward and two are facing back. And then if there is a flat back and a round back variation, which there is in both of them, one is like facing back, there's the hinge, and then there's the round back roll down part, right? So that makes it very clear in my head. And then the facing forward, that's where, so I was training Polestar, and that's where like there was three different variations, but one was really just a progression of another. So again, one of them has a neutral spine, a flat back, and one of them has a rounded spine. And then the third one I feel is just a progression of the second one. And I totally agree on the useless, like it's like this weird up and down. This seems like it's choreography. And I am personally not a big fan of making choreography a big deal. So if this is really about passing your exam, you just have to do the best in memorizing it. And you know yourself best. You know how you learn, how you memorize. I am very good at like short-term. I remember things short-term memory. So like the week before my exam, I would drill that one more time and then I would remember it. Honestly, if you ask me that, I don't teach the rowing variations very often, so I would have to look it up. I would have to go into my own membership and look it up again. right? So, and once you're trained, once you're certified, you can maybe, the easiest thing is to just teach one variation a lot because then you know that one really well. And then once you feel like super solid on this one variation, then go ahead and teach the next variation for a while to the students that it's appropriate for, because then you will know that one really well. And the better you know something, the more often you teach something, the better you'll remember it, right? But see it not, I mean, ultimately it's more of a progression. It's more of, or layer, it's almost layering, I was thinking as I was thinking through that. It's almost like, oh, let's just add this one little detail onto it, right? And I don't know the exact history of how the different variations all came about, but it seems to me very much like it's, I prefer it this way. I want to do it this way, so let's call it number 4. And then it's just being passed on. So do what you can, know your learning style, do what you can to remember them, maybe just last minute for the exam. Don't overthink it. Like if you're in the structured learning stage, yeah. So just give yourself permission also to know that once you've made it through the exam, you don't have to remember. Like nobody will think you're a worse Pilates teacher because you can't tell apart whether this is called rowing 1 or calling 2. Ultimately, it's about the movement and doing the movement correctly in terms of the function behind it. Again, whether the arms go forward or the arms go out to the side doesn't matter. And it's more important to know, should this client do spine flexion or should they not do spine flexion? Not whether the variation includes spine flexion or not. That's really, if the person is healthy, it doesn't matter if they do spine. And then you'll choose, right? Do you want to do a flat back exercise with them or do you want to do a round back exercise with them? And you choose the movement, whatever it's called, for that person. You just have to know that. So, you have to know if the client can take it. So I hope you're understanding. I'm getting a little off track, as I always do, but I hope that makes sense. So don't overthink it. Memorize it as best as you can. Make yourself a mental note, like, like if you put them in order, if you number them, if your school numbers them, just you always say, okay, first them, facing back, round, face 1 is facing back, round, 2 is facing back, flat back, 3 is facing forward, flat back, and then 4 is facing, and I don't even know if this is right, but just so make yourself a list and then go through that and memorize that. I'm going to move on to the next question. All right. Jodie is asking, thank you so much for this opportunity. You are very welcome. I'm doing my Pilates certification, and of course, I'm terrified of being rubbish at it. You're cracking me up. You're 49 years old, and you're having a career change. I'm a nurse, although there's more anatomy in this course, which I'm so surprised by, and I don't quite believe you, but it could be. I'm curious who you're training with. Okay, so along with your age, and I'm going through perimenopause, and my brain and the memory aren't so much of a sponge anymore. I'm trying to juggle everything and find myself quite overwhelmed at trying to remember everything. So I'm wondering if you have any tips on trying to not to trip over your words in the beginning and not drawing a blank. I was also wondering, as a beginner, how did you start your timings on each exercise? Did you just set a minute for each one? Or just made it as hot ad hoc as kind of thing. So just in the moment. And advice is most welcome, Jodie. All right, great. Yeah, give yourself some grace. It's again, like I just mentioned it in the previous question, my brain does not memorize. And my previous career was in acting. And it took me so long to memorize something. And then I would still, if I get nervous or something, I would still mess it up. And some people they memorize like this. And so for me, I hear you on that. And, our brains are all different. So you just have to know yourself. And yes, if you've been out of school for a while, then this memorization is hard. It all comes down to knowing how you learn best. and then finding a study system that works for you. So if you like, flashcards are great, right? Yeah, it's like trying to think, like writing things down, actually writing things out. That's why actually flashcards are great too, because in the process of creating the flashcards, you're writing things down and you're remembering it better. It's not just about using them once they're written, it's also about the writing process of them. But ultimately, it's how to stop the overwhelm is to do less. Start with a handful of exercises, focus on practicing or teaching those for a week or two, and then you know them really well, and then move on to the next. The worst thing to do is to sorry, give me 1 second, guys. Okay. The worst thing to do is to try and learn all of them at the same time, because you're going to start mixing everything up, right? Like, imagine you want to learn Spanish and Italian at the same time. You're not going to learn any language because they're so similar but different that it's going to be super confusing. So I would recommend doing less. And the way that the teacher training works these days is you get all this information, all these exercises crammed. You're trying to cram all that into your head. That's not how we work. It's just not conducive to 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 how we work. We need to learn one exercise or a handful of exercises. Those we need to learn really well. And then when we know those, then we can move on. But we are being pushed to learn things really quickly. So that's my recommendation for that. In terms of tripping over your words, is the same thing. You just gotta remember, or you just gotta practice over and over and over and over the same thing. I think we don't spend enough time with one exercise. Everything I feel that I notice and hear from teachers is too many exercises taught very quickly or not often enough. So it's quality over quantity. It's quantity over quality. And that just doesn't work. So with everything that you do, you just have to do less. So again, prepare one mat class and teach that one, talk yourself through that mat class, these 15 exercises over and over and over. And you know what? Once you're getting really good at teaching a few exercises, you develop the skills really well, and then all of the other exercises will come easier. Maybe you're thinking, and maybe not just you, but anybody who's in this phase of teacher training, is we're thinking, oh, I have to learn all of them, so let me look at all of them at the same time. But again, that doesn't work because you're not building a good foundation. So by teaching a few exercises really well, you're getting better at teaching in general, and then everything that you teach afterwards will come easy. Okay. The timing of each exercise, to be fully honest, that has always been a very intuitive thing for me. So I have been moving and exercising forever. I've been taking dance and stuff for a long time. So that was always really, I felt sort of intuitively, or as I'm watching my students, I felt when I would get tired or when they would get tired. And that's how long I went. So that's obviously not helpful. Not really, it's not precise, right? But if you watch your students carefully, you will be able to tell that they get tired. Like their form will fall apart. They're going to get sloppy. You can see it in their face. So if you really watch them carefully, you can tell when they get tired. The other thing that I've noticed that is in terms of their mental focus, if you give them a cue, people are usually able to focus on that cue for 3 repetitions. And after the 3rd repetitions, their mind goes somewhere else. So what I do a lot actually is teach 3 reps of something, take a break, and then teach another 3 reps, either of the same exercise variation or a slightly different variation. So it's variety as well as mental focus, sort of. It helps both of those. Because the worst thing that you could do, or that I find always terrible, is when people teach the 100 and they teach so slowly and they forget to count. And I know everybody laughs, but if you've been in this field for a long time, I don't find it funny anymore after a while. I just find it torture, like the not good kind. So do the 100, focus on it, count, and then move on. Or just, when you see that, yeah, you just have to remember that people are moving while you're talking, right? I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that new teachers make is as you are looking for words, your clients are engaging muscle. So they get really tired while you're looking for words. So that's why it's so important to really learn what you're saying. And I have a whole course on cueing. It's called the Cueing Cure. It's a whole course that teaches you how to cue. So it's a little bit hard to really tell you like one quick thing, but practice, 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 practice. That's the ultimate answer here. All right, moving on. Amondi, I believe. I hope I'm saying the name correctly. Apologize if it's wrong. How do I keep creating amazing lesson plans? That's a great question. So the subject of creating lesson plans obviously comes up a lot. I think is also practice, practice, practice. I mean, what is an amazing lesson plan, right? So that's a big question. But ultimately, all of Pilates teaching, you always have to remember that this one class that you're teaching right now is just a moment in time, and you can never teach everything in one class. So you have to think long term. And I think amazing lesson plans come from being a better teacher. And I know this is a very general answer right now, but the better you are at communicating, knowing your strengths, being very clear in your cues, saying less but more effective. But I mean, that's cueing, but cueing and plans are so connected too. Don't overthink the creativity. That's, I think, the ultimate thing is you don't have to be super creative every single time because you're spending a million hours on planning and not enough. Like when you create a plan, you have to then teach it. If you only teach a lesson plan once, you're actually not as great at teaching that lesson plan as if you were to teach it over and over again, right? So each time you teach the same lesson plan or class sequence, you are getting better at teaching that class sequence. So that's what makes it amazing. The experience is amazing because you know the plan really well, and you know the exercises really well, and you know the students really well, because the better you know the students, the better you can teach them, right? Everything when teaching Pilates is such a multifaceted process. It's not just a skill that you learn, it's taking everything into consideration. I think the teacher that you admire maybe that are really great are good because they're so experienced, they've been doing this a long time, and they can keep an eye on everybody and adapt to what they see in the room, and then maybe come up with something on the spot because they see what the client needs. I hope that answers your question. Creating a really creative flow does take time, and you can probably create a great flow by practicing it yourself. Layering, right, is a great skill. Yeah, that's maybe also a very general answer to maybe a little bit of a general question. But quality over quantity, right? Like I just see such a huge trend of creating different stuff, of teaching different stuff all the time. And I don't know if that's the great thing. And I think being inspired, right? You as a teacher need to be inspired, and then the experience is great, no matter whether the sequence is the same or is different. Because you can, it's so easy to make it harder in Pilates. Like you can, and if you're having fun and your clients are having fun, then they put more energy into it and everything's better. I'll leave it at that. Penny! Hi, I've been meaning to ask, how do I know how soon I can progress a client when they have had a low back disc bulge? For safety, I've been doing all exercises in a neutral spine position. When can I add spine mobility back into the repertoire? Thanks, Penny. Great question, Penny. I think the ultimate test is tolerance, right? Does your client tolerate um, flexion exercises or extension exercises? Do they have pain with it or not? Obviously, check in with them in terms of what their doctor and their physical therapist says. When you know them, I mean, even if somebody has pain with flexion during a bulging disc, then even getting up and down from the floor is painful, right? So even if you're doing the exercises in the neutral spine, you will notice that they have pain, or they will tell you that they have pain just lying down on the floor. But once they're out of pain, you can do it. The thing is stability and strength around that bulge is important, right? So the goal is not necessarily to create more mobility, because maybe that bulge happens because it's already hypermobile. I don't know what caused that, right? So it's about having a conversation with the client, you also knowing the client's strengths and weaknesses, and where are they super mobile and where are they super strong, and then just balancing them out. Ultimately, it's all about creating balance in the body. But stabilizing the area is probably, maybe that's something that they need for the rest of their lives. And also you can learn to stabilize, let's say, the lumbar spine, and you did say low back disc bulge. So you can learn to stabilize the lumbar spine while mobilizing and moving the thoracic spine, right? You can move in three different, in all different directions above. And if somebody really has that pain with flexion during a disc bulge, then no spine movement even above, like if it's lumbar, but the bulge is lumbar, but they will not like even nodding their head, not even that will be pain-free during the acute phase, right? So once they can nod their head, you can add flexion in the cervical spine, and then maybe eventually you can add flexion or extension or rotation in the thoracic spine, right? And eventually maybe in the lumbar spine. So don't think of it so much as a general with pathologies. I find the more I learn is I'm not really hyper focusing on the pathology itself and the protocol for that, because each pathology shows up slightly differently with each client. I am just going by what do I see in terms of where is the client strong and not strong, and flexible and not flexible, and then I just try and balance everything out. And if flexion hurts, obviously I'm not going to do flexion. Okay. Better aligning and balancing out strength to muscle, strength to mobility all over. I hope that is helpful. Let me have a sip. Carol is next. All right, Carol asks, I'm a new teacher and I'm having a couple of issues. The classes I take are mixed ability, and although I layer the exercises, I have noticed all my students, they all go to the hardest layer. So I'm assuming you mean the classes you teach. So all of your clients immediately jump to the hardest layer. I've tried to quietly say to some to stay at the lower level, but it's not worked. Yep. You have a second question, but let me ask this one. Let me answer this one first. Yeah, very, very common problem with layering. The biggest mistake that you probably make with this is if you say, if you want to extend both of your legs or lower your legs to the floor. So if you tell them like it's a menu, like they can pick and choose, then they will choose the harder one. So how do you know that they shouldn't? Ask yourself, how do you know that they shouldn't move on to the next layer? Like, what do you see in their body that tells you, oh, they don't have the strength to do that or the flexibility to do that? And then tell them that, give them that piece of information. So for instance, if we're on the mat in supine and we're doing the 100, and you tell them, the next layer would be to lower the legs more down to the floor, then you could tell them, if you are able to keep your low back imprinted, then you can lower your legs further down as long as you can keep the lower back imprinted. And then they will still not, even if you say it very clearly like that, they won't know what it means or how hard they have to keep the lower back imprinted. So that's where the trick with the belt comes in, where you put a belt underneath their lumbar spine and they have to press down, and the lower the legs, the looser the belt will be. I have a video of that in the membership. So you have to tell them and teach them very clearly what are the parameters that allow them to take the next level, and you have to communicate that and even teach that. Just saying that is not going to be enough either. Another example, if you do bridging and you want to lift one leg, what happens to most people is they lift one leg and the pelvis tips on that one side. So you can be very specific. It's like, if you can maintain a level pelvis as you lift one leg, then you're ready for it. If not, then only lighten the pressure on that one foot, but don't actually pick it up. And then if you see somebody's tipping or rotating the pelvis, then you have to make them aware of that, right? You have to tell them, oops, did you see how your pelvis was just tipping? And they're like, no, I didn't. And that's your teaching opportunity, right? So don't make it a menu. Be very clear what are the parameters or the prerequisites for them to be able to take the next step in the next level. Question 2. I have also done Pilates a long, I have you have some clients who have done Pilates for a long time and they race ahead. Again, I keep saying slow it down, but that doesn't work either. And last night, one finished the set before the others and went on to a new exercise of her own. Maybe I'm just not cut out for teaching. Thank you. Any advice gratefully received, Carol. Oh, Carol, you're being so hard on yourself. So yeah, it seems like, I don't know if you've been subbing for somebody else or taking over a class from somebody else. And that's the situation where, yeah, you have experienced clients who have been trained, and I'm using the term trained now, like in the sense of a dog trained, by to develop a different behavior in the class, with another teacher. So that is the hardest thing, taking over classes from somebody else. You have to be so confident and really demand that they follow you. And if they sense that you're insecure about something, then they just won't, I think, because they want a good workout kind of a thing. It depends. So it depends on how do you, if you really, I don't know how you feel right now about, are you not cut out for teaching? If it's severe, like if you're really mentally, emotionally suffering from that situation, I would remove myself from that situation and gain more confidence teaching in a different situation, right? So to be honest, so I used to teach group fitness, like step aerobics and all of that. And in step aerobics, you have some really hardcore client who've been doing this for decades. And so I was teaching step aerobics for a year and they've been taking it for 10 years. So they have like way more experience than me. And I came over to the US from Austria. So I also had to learn to teach in another language. And my brain couldn't deal with it. Like I was so nervous before the class and I was stressed out the whole class. And I messed up I might have messed up occasionally. And step aerobics, it sucks when you mess up as the teacher because everybody just stops and stands still. Or I mean, some of them go on, but they're pissed. They're really like upset because you destroyed their flow. And ultimately, to be honest, I decided I am not going to teach this anymore because there were too many challenges at once. And I just decided to teach something different, right? So if it's severe, if you're really not happy, then remove yourself from the situation, teach other classes, maybe somewhere else. Look for other classes where maybe you can work with people who are new to Pilates, because if somebody's new, they don't know any better. So they will be nicer to you. They will give you a chance to look for the words. But the other thing is teach what I've said earlier, teach less variety and get really good at teaching a few exercises, because people ultimately want a good experience and they want to be taught well. Yes, they want variety, but really they want a good workout. And if you can teach exercises better, then they're going to get a better workout. But if you keep teaching different things, then you don't have enough practice to teach them well. So that's that. And again, because I don't know exactly what the sentiment is behind the question, but I've also had people in my classes who decided to do something different, or just, yeah, seemed like they were bored. And ultimately, it's because they're not listening, they're not paying attention. It's their thing. So it's their ego. Ultimately, it's their ego, because if they truly know where to put the work, like I can go into a basic class, a foundational class, a beginner class, and get a decent workout because I know how to make it harder. And the teacher will first of all, I will talk to the teacher. I will be kind. I will be nice. I will, tell them I am modifying because of this and that. So it's ultimately it's an ego thing, right? Maybe, maybe you should just try and create a lesson plan where it's not about speed. Like if you try to, so you said you try and keep to slow it down. Choose exercises where slower is harder. And it's almost in all exercises, slower is harder. But if you like do a lot of holding and a lot of like, choose some really hard exercises where like you push out like a long stretch. I don't know if you're on the mat or on the reformer, but like holding planks, just isometrically holding is crazy hard. Moving faster is actually usually easier. So if you make the whole theme of the class slow motion, they will work really hard. It will give you more time to think about what to say, and they're sweating and they're not going to race ahead because they want to hold it longer than the rest of the class, if that makes sense. I know that might not be, it's not always about holding and stuff like that, but it's just maybe temporarily to retrain these students to be with you. And if you're always moving quickly, then they're gonna like race ahead. So like a C curve or a roll up. If you do a roll up in slow motion, they'll probably work hard, or a teaser in slow motion, or like find some exercises that people can do safely, but that get really hard when you slow them down. And then they'll probably behave better. Good luck, Carol. Leave us a comment in the leave a comment below if you like, to see how it goes. Be curious to hear what you say and how it goes. All right, next question. Pei Qing, I hope I'm saying this right. May I know what to focus on when teaching a client with scoliosis, a fusion due to scoliosis that she's had for over 20 years? So, so she has a fusion, and she also still has scoliosis. The fusion is not new, but the scoliosis she probably still has. She probably has still scoliosis somewhere else, because the fusion is over certain segments. Those were probably the most painful or most affected segments, and maybe hypermobile or whatever, they fuse those, but then she still has scoliosis. So my approach that I have learned for scoliosis in Pilates is to keep them neutral, because scoliosis is a three-dimensional curve. And anytime you move the spine in any direction, at any section, you're always causing constriction somewhere else. That's the short answer. I have a whole article in the membership about this. But so basically what I would do is I would keep her neutral, and load the spine from all directions on all planes of movement, but mostly in neutral, and really work on elongation. And if elongation and neutral stability works really well, then you can add a tiny little bit of mobility, but do not do anything that is excessive mobility. Make sure that she can move forward. She will probably, like, I use more hip movement. Make sure your hip mobility is great, because if she doesn't have a lot of spine mobility, she needs more hip mobility. She needs more shoulder mobility to make up for the lack of spine mobility. And yeah, and focus on elongation. So compression is the worst thing you can do. Elongation, two-way stretch. Those are going to be your big cues for everything. And no mermaid. I would skip mermaid. I would do a short box. And again, I don't know where you teach, but I would do a short box with a long lever. So there's a lot of stability and elongation that has to get going on, and a little bit of mobility, right? So think 90% or 80% stability, 20% mobility. All right, Marta is asking, I have been teaching Pilates since 2012, Matt, and then 8 years ago, I completed my comprehensive classical training. The one thing that still confuses me is how to teach the use of the abdominals. Yep, you're not the only one. I do not agree with pulling the abdominals in and up. I have done plenty of research, and it turns out that it compresses the internal organs and places the psoas in constant overworking mode, and ultimately causes bloating in the abdomen. How do we make sure the abdominals are working during Pilates? Maybe we just ask the client to keep the Pilates box aligned or alignment, and apply resistance during movement. Keep the four-side breathing and not just lateral. Let me know. So Marta, you are fantastic. So I love this, because you are using common sense and your own experience, and you're doing research, and you're realizing that right. And to be honest, I've been practicing Pilates for a long time, and that's what I've learned in the beginning is this up and in, and I struggle with normal breathing in Pilates. I can breathe, right? But it's hard for me, and I have to remind myself a lot to just breathe normally. So I am not an expert on breathing, but the latest sort of guidelines that I have heard is three-dimensional breathing, meaning your rib cage, you need to expand up and down. Your spine will lengthen with the breath. Your rib cage needs to expand in all directions, not just lateral, in all directions. And your belly may expand with the inhalation, because that's diaphragmatic breathing. So we just want a full breath. Ultimately, the only thing that Joseph Pilates taught us, and you know that if you're classically trained, the only thing he said about breathing is get all the air in and all the air out. That's it. There was not so much of this this micromanagement of the breath that makes us not breathe anymore. And when you start to teach beginners, everybody overthinks breathing. And then the biggest issue is that people stop breathing or hold their breath, right? They don't really stop breathing. They hold their breath when it gets hard. So, and I think that's because they're trying to think of so many things at once. And if you even make breath a subject, then they stop actually breathing. So I don't teach much breathing. I do sometimes have a hands-on thing, like depending on what's going on, to fill the breath, to sort of expand areas of the rib cage that are not moving. So ultimately, it's about looking at the client, see which area is restricted. If they have no lateral movement, yes, then they do want to improve lateral movement, and you can do side bending or tactile cueing with their hands, with your hands, to try and get more mobility into the rib cage. But I personally have very little anterior breathing. Most people do only this. I have very little of this because I've been doing lateral breathing for such a long time. So I need more of that. And I also have not very good like diaphragmatic. So it always depends on what's currently going on, like what you see in the client, and then do that. But yeah, the in and up, no. And what I love, the thing that I love the most about you is like, maybe we just ask a client to keep good alignment and apply resistance during movement, and that is it. That's spot on. So basically, how do you cue or how do you teach abdominal activation? By choosing exercises and load where they have to do that, right? So for instance, if you do a long stretch on the light spring, you cannot not use your abdominals. If you do a plank of either elbows or hands, if you do a front support, you cannot not use your abdominals. If somebody has back pain, it's not because they're not using their abdominals, but because the abdominals are too weak for what you're having them do. So you're absolutely spot on. I give you permission to follow your gut. Like, I think you have plenty of understanding and experience that you know how this works. Yes, and I barely cue abdominals. Yeah, the question comes up later again, and I'll answer the question slightly differently, more focusing on how to teach on how to cue abdominal activation. But if the exercise requires abdominals will work unless somebody's compensating. And if somebody uses compensation patterns, so I'm just thinking of a client of mine who did not use their abdominals, but it also in that situation, if somebody's abdominals don't get triggered from the nervous system, then you need to choose different exercises to help them make them work, because they cannot, by thinking about the abdominals, they won't be able to use the abdominals. And the whole up and in, actually, it's actually not using the abdominals at all. Like, it's not the way that we want to use the core for stability. So I call it connected tabletop. It's basically when you're in tabletop on the mat and you're just pressing your hands against your knees. I call that connected tabletop. That's a fantastic exercise because it really connects the whole upper and the lower body, for instance. But there's plenty of other exercises. Basically a plank. I mean, a plank is the easiest thing to start with. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. But good for you, Marta. Keep it up. You're doing great. Sip of water. Sarah is next. Uh-oh, she's asking me about spring colors, which I might not be able to answer, but let's try. Hi, Mara. Are the white springs on the balanced body combo chair similar to the blue springs on the STOTT chair? And the black on balanced body, same as the red on the STOTT chair? I do not know. The combo chair, I have to be super honest, not a fan. It's because it's so complicated. The difference between the red and the black, I feel, is not very significant. I should have looked this up. I will put the answer to this into the comments because I don't know STOTT very well, so I don't know the color difference. But when you're asking about chair, any spring tension question, it's always, you have to try it. Like when you go to different equipment, even if it's the same brand, like I have used the same exact model, like an Allegro One balanced body reformer here and then at another studio with the same springs, and it felt different. It's maybe the age of the springs. I don't know why, but when you work with different equipment, you just have to remember, you have to try it, you have to feel it. If you, for your clients, you have to ask questions to figure out how it feels. You have to experiment. Let's try a little heavier, let's try a little lower until you really know. And then you have to write it down so that you remember and you don't have to recreate that process every single time you teach. So yeah, spring tensions are so variable. And that's the thing, there are no right or correct spring tensions on no equipment. Like if anybody's like, that's something I strongly, strongly believe in. I know that in classical, every exercise has a specific spring tension. I do not believe that because every person's different, every body's different. And depending on what you're trying to achieve, it might be different. So there's that. You had another question. How do I program a scoliosis client who's also working on the Schroth method? Do I incorporate her breathing method with the Pilates movements? So the training that I took for scoliosis for Pilates was by somebody who's teaching the Schroth method. So I don't really know it super well, some of it. So the thing with that, so basically what this is it's a question about how to collaborate with other health professionals, right? How I would go about all this is I would probably have this client show me what she's doing and what she's learning. And then I would ask, so why do you do it this way? Why do you breathe it this way? What does your physical therapist, what's the goal of this and stuff like that? So once you understand what they're trying to do, I would let her incorporate the breathing totally. I mean, what you don't want to do if somebody's working with multiple people is confuse them and do contradicting stuff, because if they have to switch their breath depending on if they're working with you or with them, that's completely going to throw them off and it's going to slow down their progress. So I would see what helps them, what works for them. And yeah, I would let her use that breath if it's helpful for her. Yeah. Okay, your STOTT comprehensive exam is in February, both written and practical. It's a lot to learn and trying to go through all the exercises. I know. I'm already certified in Mat and Reformer. Oh, good. I would like to test out for Mat and Reformer level 2 and comprehensive level 1. And it tips. It's a big question. I'm working on it every day and teaching and logging all my necessary hours, along with balancing family and climbing life. Oh, it's a climber. Nice. Thanks, Mara. I love your site. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, it's a lot, like you said. It's a lot, but you know, it seems, first of all, you are already partially certified, so you've done it before. You know your learning style, you know what you have to do. And you say you're working on it every day. That's what you have to do, and you're doing it. So that's great. And you're logging your hours. Um, I don't know, honestly, I don't think I can say more than that because you're doing it, you're doing all right. Um, just maybe what I said earlier is focus, like do your exercises in batches. Don't try and do everything at once because it'll be too confusing and you can start messing things up. So work on a few and learn those really well, and then add another few or just rotate and then do for the next week doing different exercises, and but practice those until you know them really well. Instead of a little bit superficially on all of them, go deep with a few because you'll remember it better. I hope that's helpful. Yeah. And then you have one more question about confidence. You observed a 15-hour chair course this past weekend, which I already took last year. I left feeling less confident as I watched younger teachers teaching so flawlessly. Oh, I have to work on my mindset because I realized that I need to work on my competency and practice the details. I wish I didn't have these self-doubts. Thanks. Oh, I'm so sorry. So I wonder if there's a little bit imposter syndrome going on in terms like that you feel that people who are newer than you are better than you. Sometimes we see other people's strengths and we know our mistakes and we don't see our own strengths and we like downplay other people's mistakes. Like, so it's very imbalanced. I wonder if it's a little bit of that. What a question that you can ask yourself is what did you think was so good about their teaching? Like, what did they do that worked so well? And try and do that, right? And I don't know what that was. Was it because they didn't stumble over their words? Did they say less? Yeah, I don't know exactly what you liked so much about it, but try, see if you can come up with that and then see if you can do some of this. The other thing, we're all different teachers. We're all different teachers. And you might be drawn to this style, but you like as a student, like when you watch somebody or you're being taught by somebody, you might be drawn to that. But you are a different kind of person and you just cannot teach the way that that person teaches, right? Like I'm a very bubbly, as you can tell, I'm a very bubbly, animated, like I like using a lot of humor. But I'm not a hardcore kind of teacher or whatever. So I am just who I am and I can only teach that way. So take that into consideration. You have experience, right, with mat and reformer. So you've been teaching, focus on your own strengths as well as understanding, okay, you could be a little bit better in certain areas, right? Yeah, maybe make a list of the things that you're good at and the things that you could improve. Like, not clarify or try and tell apart what is something just a different way of doing things, or is it actually better? Because just being different doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse. It's just different. Um, yeah. But if you feel like you need to work on using less filler words or being having better words to say something, write a teaching script. Like whatever it is that you think you need, work on that a little bit. So once you know what it is that you need more of or do better of, then you can practice it, right? So pinpointing it and being clear about that. I hope that helps, Sarah. Okay, Eric is next. Oh, that's a good question. Okay. I have a client who works out because she needs to and knows Pilates is cool. I've been teaching her for over a year now. She started out with just mat, then did reformer at mat, and then stopped doing reformer because it was too much work. These are her own words. She was a lot better at the reformer than she is on the mat. I complimented her a lot, and she prefers and continues to cheat on the mat. Yep, that's why she likes doing mat because she can cheat. I hoped she would get a somewhat deeper understanding of the work when she did both. Nope. You're funny. She brings the energy down in my Monday evening class. She doesn't really want to move. She stops after 4 single leg stretches, etc. I tried everything, ignoring her somewhat, stimulating her, talking to her after class, asking to focus on her own body, and even offered to do a one-on-one, which she then doesn't follow up. I don't mind that she doesn't want to put the work in. Well, I do, but what are you gonna do? But it's setting a mood in the class, and therefore everybody else in that class is getting somewhat lethargic. And I know what you're probably gonna say, compliment her for showing up. I do, and always have done, but my patience is running thin. Have you ever come across a client like this? And if so, how did you handle it? I'm so fortunate that almost all of my clients are lovely. They all want to move and try their utmost to translate cues in their own bodies. Sending love and things from Sweden, the Netherlands. Erico, that's so lovely. Uh, Greetings back to the Netherlands. So, oh my gosh, it sounds like a nightmare. I'm sorry I have to go through this. So my gut reaction, yes, I've had difficult clients in the past. Um, to be honest, to be honest, especially in a group class, you're probably better off losing this client. Um, what I mean with that, like, if she's not putting the work in, then don't put the work in. Okay. I think that is the one part that burns us out in Pilates. And it's happened to me before that we as the teachers care more about our clients' well-being than our clients care about their own well-being. And that is a problem because then your energy doesn't get topped up. Like you don't get back the energy that you're giving out. And that's how we burn out. So you did everything. You're doing everything right. Okay. First of all, you're doing everything right. All of the things that you've tried with her and stuff, it's all right. She's just not there. And for some people, ultimately it's the mindset. It's not the body, it's the mind. Okay. So my first suggestion would be to stop trying, to really stop trying. You can obviously continue to teach her when she comes to your class, but don't, like, what happens when somebody like that, they want your mental energy and your focus and your attention, and you give it, right? So they're acting up in class. They're the high maintenance clients because they thrive on getting this attention. Once you stop giving her attention by ignoring her, and I think you said that you did some of that, she will not get that, and then something will change. Either she will leave, and again, to be fully honest, you're probably better off because she can find Pilates anywhere else. Um, and again, it's like everybody's in your class suffers from that, right? From her behavior. So everybody's going to be better off without her. And I know this is I don't know if you want to call it mean, but it's just is what it is. So either she just leaves because she's not getting the attention that she wants, or something's going to change in her behavior. Okay. And I think you're probably at the point where you're so frustrated anyway that you're willing to try it because in the beginning, we always want to convince people. You cannot convince her in any other way, right? Um, but the whole squeaky wheel, I don't know if you know the phrase, but we have this phrase saying the squeaky wheel gets the oil, meaning the people who complain the loudest get all of our attention, and all of the good clients that behave, that work hard, they're not getting our attention. So you cannot continue to focus on high maintenance clients that are not that drag everybody else down. Um, so yeah, I would ignore her, and the important, like, really try maybe to focus on your good clients. Mention the name of your good clients, because if she realizes that everybody else get attention from you for having different behavior, if she still wants your attention, she might start to emulate that other behavior. But so far, you've been enabling her bad behavior, not intentionally. I get it, right? Because if you like, you don't know when you first start working with her, but somebody you don't know, like, if you might have to give attention to somebody who's not doing very well physically. You have to, right? But then after a while, you realize, oh, she's just doing this to get my attention, sort of. So if you really ignore her for a few weeks, and mention other people's names in class a lot, and congratulate them or encourage them, then maybe her behavior would change. And again, maybe she won't, and she'll leave, and then everybody's better off with that too. I hope that's helpful. Sadie's asking, cueing the abdominals. Yes, I'm looking for the best visual explanation when it comes to pulling the belly in and up or scooping the belly. So, Sadie, please listen to my answer that I gave Marta because I was talking a lot about that. So the whole in and up, yeah, it just doesn't even work. It's basically about don't ever use the word abdominals. See what happens if you don't use the word abdominals in your classes. That's a great challenge, I think, for everybody who wants to do it. See if you can teach a Pilates class without saying the word abdominals or abs or core. It's gonna be interesting. Um, yeah, ultimately so there are a few images that I do use. For instance, when you lie prone, if you don't say anything about core activation, then people drop their belly and they're using their lumbar spine. So in that situation, my favorite cue of two, one is zipping up your jeans. It does draw the belly in, right? And thereby stabilizes your lumbar spine a little bit. And also imagine a rubber band across your hip bones, or like, let's say that these were my hip bones. Imagine a rubber band across and you pull it taut. And by pulling it taut, you feel also the abdominal wall pulling in a little bit. So that is the one cue that I use. And for everything else, if I can avoid it, so if it's not prone or quadruped where gravity pulls the abdominal wall down, I would choose exercises where people have no other chance but to use it. Let me add one more thing that I didn't say earlier. Beginner clients. So that's the weird paradox. Pilates has so many paradoxes. Beginning clients who don't know how to activate their abdominals often have weak abdominals. So you need to strengthen their abdominals. But the easy exercises are sometimes not, they're too easy for people to have to use their abdominals. So the paradox is that with somebody like that, a beginner who who has no concept of core, I would actually do exercises like planks. I would do lots of planks with them because they have to use their abdominals. And then I would afterwards, or after a while, or after I've maybe started with a plank, I would then have them lie supine and say, okay, now see if you can make your core feel the way that it felt in the plank. And now they already have a concept for what you want. And then they just mirror that or copy their own feeling. They're not trying to copy your cue because that could be misinterpretation there. They're just trying to copy what they've already felt. I'll leave it at that. I hope that makes sense. Andrea from Austria, yay! I did 2 interviews with Andrea. One was in German, one was in English. It's on my YouTube, it's not on my YouTube channel. You'll find it on my About page if you're interested in listening in. So nice to hear from you. Okay, this is another question about a needy client, and I need a quick sip. This is a great question. Last Monday, I had a violinist who told me on the phone that she only wanted to work on the reformer. She only needs very specific exercises for her foot, her ankle, and her knee alignment. She knows all of the Pilates exercises, which she doesn't need because she's been doing them for a year. And she wants to be only on the reformer for half an hour because she can't afford a whole hour. So you said, I wanted to start out with engaging her lower abdominals while sitting down on the reformer and saw that her pelvis didn't do anything. To cut a long story short, this violinist was here for an hour as she was talking about all the exercises she has been doing with other Pilates teachers and physiotherapists. I then told her to come to group classes, firstly to become more independent, and secondly for money reasons. She turned up yesterday 10 minutes late and had no idea about any of the Pilates principles. I just thought this picky lady would be easier to handle in a group situation, but it didn't feel grounded like in my other group classes. I felt irritated by her like 29 years ago when I couldn't handle a complicated client. Oh my gosh. I don't blame her. I blame myself for not sticking to my principles and lesson plan. I was surprised that after so many years, I can still get derailed by a needy personality. Would you let her disrupt your group where I have various levels, but they already know how to look after themselves? Or would you teach her half an hour reformer and persuade her to try other equipment to get her inner suspension system going? So, such a great question, Andrea. And I encourage you to listen to my answer to that I gave Erica just 2 answers ago, if you haven't yet. So, because it's a very similar situation. Yeah, it's high maintenance. Oh boy. So the first thing that I'm asking you is there a reason why you're not giving her what she wants, which is half-hour lessons on the reformer? So if somebody has a very specific, like they want something very specific, if that's something you offer, just give it to her. Like if she wants half-hour reformer classes, give her half-hour reformer classes. Like if somebody yeah, like that's what she wants, give it to her. If you are not teaching half-hour classes, explain to her, why, and then she can just, and then it's up to her to decide, does she want to do group classes instead or private lessons instead, full hour private lessons, right? So, but you have to I think you would sort of have to let her choose because she wants something very specific, and if she can't get that, like basically my bottom line is pushing somebody into something that they don't want is just not a good approach because they'll have resistance to that. Um, you say she's a violinist. I'm actually curious if she's a professional violinist. Like, is she really busy and type A? If she's a professional violinist, then she's maybe type A and she knows exactly what she wants and she doesn't want to waste her time. I can maybe somewhat relate to that. Um, yeah, so there's that. I don't know if so I don't know how she started. Did you mention how she ended up in a group class? Yeah, you told her to come to group classes first. So maybe she's just is not into that and why she came late, you know? I mean, that's obviously passive aggressive. She could just tell her that she doesn't want to do group classes instead of being late for them and then disrupting the rest of the group. I get that too. Um, the fact that she thinks she's great, sort of, but she doesn't know the Pilates principles and she can't apply all that. So that's another issue. I would get to know more. I would love to hear more of her experience. I would have a conversation with her about like where did supposedly she's been practicing for a year. Where was that? Who did she work with? Maybe you know this teacher. Maybe you can even talk to that teacher. Call them up and ask how their experience was. That might be very helpful. But maybe you know how that teacher teaches, and maybe you now know why she works the way she works, but maybe it has nothing to do with that teacher. Um, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Try and give her what she needs, and especially if she's disruptive in a group class, it might be best if you not teach a group class, if you just do a half hour with her. Maybe you can combine it with a lunch break or something for you, because I know a half hour kind of disrupts our own flow. I hope that's helpful. I'll leave it at that. I hope that's helpful. Uh, and yeah, drop some comments below and we can continue talking. Ania, I'm a member of Pilates Encyclopedia. Yay! My question is, I'm thinking about creating a workshop in my hometown with the topic of pre-Pilates mat, and I wonder how many weeks would it be reasonable to introduce pre-Pilates? I think I'm planning on meeting once a week Question is, what do I think about the idea? How long should one class take, considering it is once a week? And how many weeks should I run it for the workshop to influence people's awareness of the body and prepare them for Pilates mat? I think I might rent a room in a yoga studio. Thank you so much for your answer. Kind regards, Ania. So yeah, that's a great idea. First of all, it's great that you are renting a room in a yoga studio. That's fantastic. That keeps your overhead really low. Um, for a pre-Pilates, so what you didn't tell me is why you're thinking of offering that. I'm not against it at all, but in terms of marketing it and getting people into the class, people don't know what pre-Pilates is and why they should be doing that, and why can't they just join a regular class? So the question is, why do you want to teach it, and how did you come up with it? Where do you see the need? Do you have people already interested? Because all of that affects the answer, or right? So the people who need pre-Pilates are often people who have no body awareness, and that's what you want to work on. So, but that's often like, increasing body awareness is sometimes not, it's not sexy enough, if you don't mind my expression. Like, it's not a good enough reason for people to join. Like, people come, like, that's the, like, find out what is the problem that you're solving. I think that's the thing. What is the problem that you're solving? Awareness is not a problem they have. They don't perceive lack of awareness as a problem. The problem that they understand is, I have back pain. And yes, the back pain might be because they have a lack of awareness of their core, and so they don't know how to use it, and so on and so forth. So um, it could be a gentle movement class, right? So people who are afraid of moving, who are often don't have any body awareness. Um, sorry, I'm getting a little too many thoughts in my head, but basically, make sure when you market it, you don't market it as a pre-Pilates class unless people have specifically been asking for that. So if people have been asking a class that prepares them for a mat class, then you can call it Pilates mat preparation or something, workshop, right? But if people, but so yeah, ask yourself why do you even want to teach it? And then all of the other things, like if you have people already interested, ask those people. Like, I would say make the class no more than an hour long, because it's a lot of awareness. And I would, maybe once a week is great. And I would say, I would actually do just a 4-week class for pre-Pilates. And if it's really just awareness and stuff like that, people love it. You can add another, you could do a follow-up 4-week, tops 6 weeks, maybe. Because then you can, if the goal is for these people to then move into in one of your regular Pilates classes, then get them in there quickly. Um, yeah, I hope that was helpful. Right, the biggest takeaway with this is that is the marketing of it, I think. Ginger is asking, hey Ginger, good to hear from you. I have been taking and teaching Pilates for over 23 years now. I started at 55 and now I work with seniors. I've had both hips replaced within the last year, due to osteoarthritis. Thank goodness my bones are strong. Yes, indeed. But I struggle with flexibility. I have never been able to do a roll up. I tell my clients that's okay, but not to push yourself beyond what your body tells you. I also have a very hard time pulling my knees into my body, like rolling like a ball, etc. And I know it's all connected. Am I telling them the right thing? Most of my classes are on Zoom, and I can teach better, than I can do Pilates. I'm friends with most of my clients. The youngest is 62, the oldest 85. They seem to respect me, but sometimes I don't feel worthy. Oh, any feedback would be appreciated. Oh, Ginger. Um, so it's totally okay. I mean, you don't have to be, you don't have to move like a 20 or 30-year-old. And your clients are in the same boat, right? And you've had two knee replacements. So the whole goal changes. Your goal is not to do the perfect exercises anymore. The goal is just to feel better. Um, the skill of teaching is a different skill than doing. You are not a worse teacher because you can't demonstrate everything perfectly. Um, you're a good teacher because you can help clients. Like a doctor doesn't have to have a herniated disc to help you with your herniated disc, right? Or your surgeon doesn't have to do surgery on himself and replace his own hip in order to give you a good, do a surgery well, giving you a new hip. Like it's only in Pilates that we think that that matters. The skill of teaching Pilates is a completely different skill from doing Pilates. And it's it's totally okay. And I know that when you're like I don't worry about this anymore at all. If I can't demonstrate it, I'll explain it. It's like my hips don't do this, or I have a hip issue going on, or like you have a good reason. You've had both hips replaced. Um, I can't imagine that any of your clients or your friends would give you a hard time about anything like that, right? So this is really, I think it's just you. I think it's just in your own head. Or because you might be taking, like your own teachers maybe are more physically able than you are. And so now you feel like you should be like them, but you don't. Okay. Um, Like I'm never demonstrating in classes to begin with. I mean, over Zoom it's maybe different, but I don't demonstrate. So nobody would actually know if I can do it. There's a lot of things you do not know whether I can do or not. I just don't mention that I can't do things. I sometimes do because I want teachers to know that I'm not perfect. So I do often mention the things that I can't do. Most teachers don't. Um, we always portray to the outside what we're good at. We don't necessarily tell everybody what we're bad at, right? It takes vulnerability to do that, but also it's sort of bad. We think it's bad marketing, right? But come on, those are your friends, Ginger. Those are your friends. It's okay. And yeah, your spine, if you don't mind me saying that, but your spine at your age will not become more flexible. What you're doing right now is maintaining flexibility as best as you can, right? And maintaining strength as best as you can. You're not going to be able to all of a sudden be able to do a roll up in your 70s if you couldn't do it at your 50s, in your 50s, right? And that's okay. That's totally okay. I hope that helps. You're fine. Every time I interact with you on our meetups, you have so much to give. You have such great spirit and such motivation, and that that is what your clients get from their classes with you is the joy of movement, which they wouldn't move otherwise, but with you they do, and you make it fun and you encourage them and you help them feel a little bit better, right? It's not about you being perfect in every single exercise. Let it go. Let it go. Okay, moving on to Michelle. I have a client who has MS and is wheelchair bound. We use the Cadillac and have been able to do quite a bit, but I would love thoughts, tips, and exercises you might suggest to keep it fresh for her and help her continue to make progress. She is making progress and loves what we're doing. Things, and I'm a member, and I love your site. Aw, thank you. Okay, so to be honest, I have not worked with a client in a wheelchair, so I don't have much experience with that. Yes, using the Cadillac sounds like a great idea. Um, so, honestly, you probably have more experience with this than I do. I'm just trying to think. It's probably mostly upper body work, right? Because she's not walking. Is she in a wheelchair? Yeah. Uh, so she's not getting out of, you can't get her out of the wheelchair and onto the table. I'm just thinking to do exercises maybe for the lower body. And I don't know if this is possible or if this is an option. Because if she's in the wheelchair, then you don't have a lot of options, right? You can really only give her hand weights, you can use TheraBands, you can use the magic circle, but it's all upper body and I mean you can do a little spine mobility. Core strength is going to be hard and back strength is going to be hard if she's sitting in the chair. I mean, you can do rowing, which works on her back and stuff like that. But if she's able to get out of the chair and sit on the table, still sitting, but sit on the table, then you have more options. Or if she can lie down on the table. But if she has to be in the chair all the time, that's going to be quite limiting. So I actually don't want to say too much more because first of all, I don't have that much experience with it. And um, yeah, what I just said, like if you can get her out of the chair in the class, then you have a lot more options. Otherwise, it seems like, you're doing good work with her. I'm happy to continue the conversation if you leave me a comment and you clarify this a little bit. Then another Michelle, a different Michelle, is asking, how do I increase my prices without turning off current clients? Ooh, yeah, that's painful. That's painful for a studio owner. So the thing is you just do it, right? You just do it. It is helpful to prepare a email newsletter, or put something maybe on the website, and maybe explain briefly why you're increasing your prices. It depends on how much you increase your prices, right? So I've seen different approaches. Some studios or some people who work in the space or teach in the space, they actually recommend you raise your prices every year a little bit, and then it's an annual thing, and people will get used to it. Oh, yep, it's the first of the year, prices go up a little bit. Like if the price only increases a little bit, people don't worry too much. And if it's a regular thing, that they get used to it, right? If you feel that, like if you're sitting at home and you realize you've been undercharging and you can't make your numbers work, and you're in the red or whatever, and you really need to raise your prices to be able to be sustainable, then you can be honest and say that. You can say, after much deliberation, sadly, we'll have to increase our prices because of our expenses. And I mean, that's a matter of wording, right? Like, but you can say you've been undercharging, and just you can say that you're doing this just to be able to break even, and to be able to pay all your bills, and so that the business stays around, right? Because people ultimately want you to be in business, stay in business. And if you're being honest with them and saying, guys, I hate to do this to you. I'm not doing this because I want to get rich, but I need to be able to pay my bills. Then, you know, they might understand, even if it's a more significant increase. But ultimately, the most important thing about price increases is to give them plenty of time. So right now is the end of October. I would recommend you get the information about the increased prices out as soon as possible, like early November if you can. and then give them the heads up, but actually only raise your prices, let's say the first of the year. Because if people have 2 months to wrap their head around the price increase before it's actually happening, then they calm down. So what's bad is to say, okay, as of next week, prices increase. That's because then it's the shock and people don't have an option. And if you give people time to adjust to that, then technically they have time to go somewhere else, and probably they won't find another place that is as cheap as you are. So they'll hang out anyway, but they just have to emotionally make it through this process of accepting the higher prices, right? That so, and then the last thing I want to say to that is ultimately just tell them clearly and directly, don't make it a drama. It is business, it's not a hobby. We all have to, all have to pay our bills, and life gets more expensive. It's in Pilates, we do have the tricky thing with what we do is that we thrive on recurring revenue and recurring clients, right? So our clients keep coming back to us, and so we can't sneak in a price increase. Like, for instance, my hairdresser, who I love, but she had a phase, right now it's fairly stable, but she has a phase where every time I went, every 6 weeks, the price went up, and went up quite a bit. And I did not get a warning. It was basically, you get your haircut, then you go to pay, and then all of a sudden it was $20 more than it was last time. And then that happened again. So that is something that we can't do. That just doesn't work in Pilates. We can't sneak it in, right? Or like seasonal businesses, I'm thinking like campgrounds or whatever. Every time there's a new season, like they shut down in the winter, and then when they reopen in the next season in the spring, these are the prices. And they have a chance to raise prices in that process. We in Pilates don't have that opportunity because we have this recurring year-round kind of a thing. But ultimately, everybody does it, and your eggs are more expensive and everything's more expensive. So, and I know we don't have a supply chain, right? Like companies who sell products, they can say, oh, our supply chain or our raw materials have gotten more expensive, so we have to pass those price increases on to our customers. We can't say that because we already have a reformer. We're not paying more for the reformer that we bought 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So yes, it's harder for us than it is for other businesses. That's why ultimately you just have to do it, because life gets more expensive, and maybe you have a good reason. So if you have a black and white reason for raising your prices, then tell them that, right? Maybe it's electricity or heat or whatever it is. And if not, just tell them the price adjustment. And maybe think about like making it really an annual thing, and giving maybe people a chance to buy at the old price, like a package, a 10 package or whatever it is, before the price goes up. That also very much helps, because, and I know that for you, how much you make will be delayed quite a bit. Okay. But you can definitely help them out with that. And then again, maybe make it a regular thing, an annual thing, so that you don't have to go through this drama. If you personally as the owner struggle a lot with that pressure, the small incremental price increases every year might be better, because it's the annual price increase versus going through this whole drama again in 5 years when you have to raise again. Okay, moving on to Pam. Pam is asking, I have an 86-year-old woman who comes to me once a week for 30 minutes. Her primary concern is falling. She says she worries about it constantly. She has been coming for about 4 months and continues to be fearful of the reformer. She's afraid she will get her fingers caught when we do footwork. So yesterday I gave her 2-pound weights. I gave the arm something to do. She's uncomfortable lying on her back. It hurts around her midline, even with 2 pads and the headrest up. She's scared of the box, but I recently got her to use the long box to do a little abdominal work. We use the tower to work balance. She also does eaves, lunge, and bridging. It's a slow process. Originally, she wanted to do privates, then join a group class. She has come to realize that it's not going to be safe. Do you have any suggestions for balance work or anything else we can do? She's a delightful woman and I enjoy her humor. I just need more ideas. Thank you, Pam. Well, 86, Pam. Wow. Yeah, this client, she's doing great. The fact that she's there is amazing. And yes, she's afraid of falling, and good for her for doing something for it. So if she's afraid, it's okay. Let her be afraid, right? Choose exercises that she feels comfortable doing. The more, so hold on, she's been coming for 4 months. Okay. So 4 months is a good time, but maybe she needs more time to really trust. And it's not, it's trusting you, but it's also trusting herself. So I want to tell a quick story. I did a mountaineering course last year in the winter, and as part of that, we did a little ice climbing. And I have never rock climbed with rope, let alone ice climb. And I was up there, and I'm willing to try anything. I was up there, and my hands got really tired, and I got the feeling that I um I knew I couldn't trust my own hands. I didn't have the strength in my hands. And that's a whole other story. I don't know if anybody's climbing, but I did it wrong, but because I was not taught very well. I was overusing my hands, and that's why they got so tired. But that experience, that fear, and that of not trusting myself there got me into a little bit of a spiral, and I started breaking down and started crying. I wasn't mad at anybody, but it was such an emotional experience of like, I don't trust myself. I know that I don't know what I'm doing, or I know that I'm too weak for this. Okay. So if somebody's in this, if the nervous system freaks out like that, and then we have to respect that. So if she's afraid of something, do not push her to try something that she's afraid of. The more exercises she does that she's safe, she feels safe, the more she will trust you, the more she will trust herself, and the more she might be willing to try something down the road. But maybe it's still too early. So I think you mentioned long box abdominal work. So I've heard from other people that are afraid of the box, and it's because it's on a moving carriage. So if you can do exercises on the box on the tower, she might not be afraid of the box. It's just because the box is on a moving carriage, and that's scary. So get her used to the box on the floor, maybe even on the floor. Have her lie prone or seated or whatever on the floor on the box, or on the tower on the box. And then you can put the box on the reformer with all springs attached and tell her that. And so, yeah, so she needs to learn skills. She needs to learn to trust her own body, but yeah, don't push her. I would definitely 100% say don't push her. One thing about balance that I'll just tell you is closing the eyes actually is like makes it much, much harder to balance. So let's say she's standing on one leg, and maybe even try having her stand on both legs and have her close her eyes, because even then she might be, losing her balance. And make sure she have her stand by the tower, both hands wrapped around the bar, and then just open the hands so that she can grab it. It's right there. You stand behind her. Give her all of the security and safety that she needs so that she's willing to try it. But by closing your eyes, your body learns to use the other systems, because balance is a combination of several systems in the body. And so by closing the eyes, you take away that system, and the other system, the inner ear balance system and the proprioceptive sense, have to go on overdrive. And so your balance improves a lot faster if you make it harder in terms of closing your eyes. But again, she needs to be super, super safe to even try it. Um, that is my suggestion for that. In terms of the your back hurts lying supine. Yeah, I've had people too, they hurt when they lie on the back. So lie her maybe on a wedge or maybe in a C shaper if she's if her or a spine corrector or something like that. Like she might have to be on an incline with a pillow, at least into slight thoracic flexion to be able to be comfortable. That's not abnormal, but also like do a lot of stuff sitting and standing in the position where she spends a lot of time in. Um, at that age, really like think out of the box. It's about quality of life, right? Moving on to Devan. Can you provide more information? Or sorry, can you provide more modification for folks with wrist issues that want to do long stretch, upstretch, elephant series, or using the long short box? So yeah, that's tricky. I would say try and figure out every reformer model is different. So I don't want to say just one thing. Experiment, but you could put the box over or on the platform, on a standing platform, or over the reformer, over the foot bar, and put your forearms on it, and then do similar exercise. You can do a variation of long stretch and stuff there. But I honestly, I mean, elephant without wrists, that you just can't. Honestly, you just can't. I just wouldn't do it there. I would do it. Yeah, it's tricky. I would look at the wrist. Why is the wrist such an issue? I would look at that first and then maybe just do one exercises with the wrist and then back off of it again. On the mat, you have more options. You can use push-up handles. And you know what, why I'm saying about look at what's going on with the wrist, because some people who have wrist issues, it's actually not a wrist issue, it's a forearm issue, it's a weakness in the upper extremities, because even if they use push-up handles, they still have wrist issues. But it's not because they're on an angle and they have pressure on it, but because they have weak grip strength, maybe grip strength, which is forearm strength. So do more exercises actively to correct their forearms and wrists and hands, and then they can deal with those exercises, maybe, right? Putting the little ghost thing, so having a sticky pad, folding that up and putting that in the center so that pads the wrist a little bit, that can help if it's really the pressure on the wrists. Which grip is it, the full grip or the suicide grip? Does one feel better than the other? Like I know that this turns the shoulders inward a little bit, but maybe then they can use the strength of their hands, which takes away the pressure from the wrists. So that could be an option. And you could try and turn things around. Instead of doing long stretch, you could do front control front, and then you can put a long box or short box on the reformer in front of the shoulder rests, elbows there, feet on the foot bar, and then you could do it that way. I know that the load is different, but it's a great way to do a plank variation. And then, yeah, elephant doesn't really work so well. Okay, I hope some of those tips were helpful. Kari or Kari, I don't know. I find getting students to feel the value of stomach massage difficult. Can you help perhaps break it down into some smaller movement skills and their value, and then how to combine that into stomach massage in a way that feels valuable for students? Okay. So my first question is, what do you find valuable in stomach massage? Always start with yourself and share what you know. Okay. To be honest, I don't like stomach massage. I personally, I'm admitting this, I do not care for stomach massage. I don't see the value of it. I'm gonna try and help answer your question, but I'm working, the only time I would probably do Stomach massage is on a classical, on a classical reformer. It really, in that exercise, it really makes a big difference. And I don't know, maybe you are working on a classical reformer, so that could be helpful. So it's a lot of hip flexion, right? So it's a lot of flexions, a lot of hip flexions, a lot of knee flexion. It's ankle dorsal and flexion. So there's a lot of joint mobility in the lower extremity going on, and then keeping the upper body stable in relation to that. It's a little bit like footwork, but you're upright. Um, I struggle with that, Kari. I'm going to be completely honest. So the movement skills that you're doing is knee flexion, hip flexion, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, mostly. You have a little bit of a C curve, but it's mostly spine stability. So those are your movement skills, okay? But what you feel, like that, whether you feel something or not feel something, that's always a matter of the load in relation to the shape of the body. And I mean, you could try heavier springs, you could try really light springs and see how that changes. For me personally, I'm already so tight, and all this flexion is already what my body is in so much of the time. And then maybe that's why I'm not feeling much when I do it. It just is too much of what I'm already doing all day long. So the reason why it feels so good on a classical reformer for me is because I have to pull myself in, which activates my posterior chain. So now I'm getting benefit from that. I think maybe the people who benefit from stomach massage are the ones that have a hard time pulling the knees into the chest. For instance, if you have somebody who struggles with this, then they might benefit from that on a heavy spring because it pushes them together, right? That would require, this would probably require more in-depth study with lots of different people on my end. But I'm also happy to continue the conversation with you, Kari, about what I would love to hear from you, why you love or why you value stomach massage. I'd love, especially because this is one of those rare exercises that I don't like. So yeah, I'd love to continue the conversation. Sorry, I can't say much more than that at this point. Um, if you do have some clients who like it, ask them why they like it. That will, and ask yourself, obviously, or teachers that you've worked with or something, or colleagues or something. It's like if you hear from somebody why do you like it, like and not just it makes me feel so good, but if you can get more detailed information, then we can dig a little bit deeper. Okay, moving on to Lynda. What's my advice for a client with super tight hamstrings, a flat lower back, lack of hip mobility, and popping sounds in the hip joints? That is a very general question, Lynda. Um, so yeah, it's hard because it's such a big general question. But let me see. Tight hamstrings. So tight, I wonder if you mean short with tight. Since that client also has a flat lower back, it sounds to me like their hamstrings might be short, which pulls their pelvis into a posterior tilt, which flattens their low back. So for that, they just need a lot of hamstring stretching, which is footwork on the table, on the Cadillac. Yeah, anything where you can stretch and lengthen hamstrings. Lack of hip mobility. When you say hip mobility, do you mean hamstrings? Because that would be the same, right? It's the same thing. But maybe they also have restricted hip mobility in other directions. So I don't know if you're a member of Pilates Encyclopedia, but I highly recommend you check it out because we list everything by movement skill. And again, hip mobility alone is not enough information. Like you need to know which direction of hip mobility. Hips can move 360 degrees, and hips can be mobile in one direction, but not mobile in another direction. So first you need to know which directions are limited, and then choose exercises that increase the mobility in that direction. And we have all of that listed in the membership. So I think that would help you a lot. The popping sounds in the hips, I also have a post about that in the membership in the special populations category. And it's most of the time it's because a tendon is sort of rubbing over a protrusion of a joint. And the solution for it, first of all, it's not a huge issue if it's happening, but if you really want to work to get rid of it, you need to balance out all the muscles around the hip, and that goes hand in hand with the hip mobility. So you need to know which directions, in which directions is the hip mobile, and in which is it not mobile, and in which is it strong, and in which is it not strong. And once you know all of that, then you can balance it out. So whatever is too mobile, you'll work on stability or on strength. Whatever is too weak, whatever is too mobile, you'll work on strength, because strength is the opposite of mobility. And whatever is the directions that are not mobile enough, you'll work on improving mobility. And that's how you balance the whole thing out. And that is what will hopefully help reduce the popping sounds. And the popping is also, it's different. It can happen in the front of the hip and in the side of the hip and in the back of the hip. So depending on all of that, there's different problems. And again, I have a post on that in the membership. I really encourage you to check it out. Again, it's as little as $15 for the mat. And you get answers to all of that. Nikki. Thank you so much for offering the opportunity to ask questions. You are very welcome. I'm about halfway through my hours for certification at a local studio, and I feel like there's not enough time in content on how to properly describe each position and movement without overwhelming the students. Yes, you are right. Is it best to stay away from Pilates terminology when you're teaching a mixed level class? So I'm guessing that's another question. And then also, am I NASM certified, and would you recommend doing it right away when you're starting out? So no, I am not a personal trainer. I'm not NASM certified, although I have been thinking about it and I've been wanting to do it, but I don't find the time. Yes. Would I recommend doing that right away when you're starting out? No, I would not recommend doing 2 certifications at the same time. So if you're halfway through your hours for the certification, finish that. Finish one thing and then do another thing. It's too much otherwise, right? But I do recommend a personal trainer certification, actually. So for Pilates teachers, I think that's incredibly helpful, because it helps you think about movement through a different lens. And I think that's so great to get us out of our little Pilates box. Yes, taking more Pilates training is good too, but I find looking at movement from a different perspective more helpful. And then once you've done the personal training thing and you see things so the thing is that in Pilates, a lot of the way that we learn Pilates is through tradition, passing on what we've been taught still. And the personal training thing comes more from the science perspective, and bringing those two together, I think, is really good. Once you've done all of that, so once you are certified in Pilates and you're certified in personal training, then you can decide where you want to learn more from. I think that's helping more than doing more Pilates training, because you're missing out on that scientific foundational training. But do one after the other you don't want to overwhelm you like that. Yes, so in terms of teaching, there's not enough time to say everything in a class or in an exercise. You are 100% correct. The biggest thing, the most, hopefully, how should I say it? If I can only tell you one rule for teaching Pilates is a long-term process. Teaching Pilates is a long, as a long-term process. You cannot teach everything in one class. You have to teach something in this class and build upon that over the course of weeks or months or years. So whenever you think of planning classes, working with a particular client, you always have to have a long-term plan. Obviously, you got to start somewhere the first time you meet them. But then from there, you can set goals, but you have to know that you have to trickle information in one at a time. It doesn't work to try and get everything at once. So when you teach an exercise, you have to get them set up. That is actually really important. A detailed setup is very important. And then you got to get them to move. And that's about where it stops. Those are the most important thing. And then the details happen one at a time, one class at a time. So in this class today, you're adding one tiny little thing about the pelvic alignment. In the next class, next week, in the same exercises, you're adding another detail about, I don't know, ankles. I don't know what, right? So you can only sprinkle details in. You cannot teach everything at once. Impossible. Is it best to stay away from Pilates terminology when you're teaching a mixed level class? So I am not sure what you mean with Pilates terminology. Mixed level class. I'm guessing maybe you mean like images that we typically use, like navel to spine or zip up your jeans. Like if you throw in a cue like that and somebody's completely new and they've never heard this cue, then they don't know what to do with it. Yes, and I like your awareness that you recognize that that's not helpful for somebody who doesn't know what that means. So if you have a brand new person in the class, you could say you just instruct the imagery as if as if it were the very first time. And then, if you have a lot of people in there who've been doing this for a long time, then I would say, for some of you, this is old news, but for the new people here, let me just give you, let me explain an image. Imagine, and you don't even have to see that because then it's a lot of words for nothing. You could just say, imagine you're wearing a really tight pair of jeans, and in order to close those tight jeans, you have to pull your belly in a little bit, and it's like zipping up your jeans. There, you explained the image. Now your newbies also understand what that means. And then maybe the next time you can just say zip up your jeans, right? If you repeat the same cue in the same class a few more times, then it sinks in more. And then I probably wouldn't use other imagery cues, right? So if I wouldn't throw, like, trying to be super creative and use a million different cues in the same class can be more confusing than helpful. So if you establish one imagery cue, like the zip up your jeans, then use it often because it deepens in your students' memory and in their experience, and they can apply it in the body in different exercises. It's probably better than using a ton. Or like C curve and that kind of stuff. Yeah, you have to explain it. If you have somebody brand new in class, you have to explain all of the terminology or all of the imagery that you use. You have to explain it the first time. Yeah, I hope that helps. Lisa is asking, thank you for making this opportunity available. You're so welcome. I've paid in full for my Pilates teacher training in Southern California. However, the instructor is giving me a tremendous amount of anxiety. I have over 20 years of experience practicing Pilates, but zero experience in teaching. Since I am being treated differently than the other students, I get singled out and spoken to harshly because I do not know or remember how to teach the exercise. I'm no longer loving Pilates, and I'm having a very difficult time retaining any of the information, cues, or teaching, etc. I was hoping to learn how you teach your new students so I can compare. I know I'm not exaggerating because the other students have brought it to my attention. This Pilates instructor is also my Pilates person that I have known and practiced with for 20 years. How? I'm so sorry, Lisa. That sucks. You know what? So if you have a 20-year relationship with this teacher, then you need to go up to this person and call her out on this and say, I'm assuming it's a her, and just say, why? Okay, no, here's what you're saying. You say, I'm so sorry, but I have to bring this up. I've been very, very anxious and very stressed out in the teacher training because I feel, and you always have to speak for yourself, like don't blame her or accuse her, just say how you feel. So I feel a little bit that you're singling me out. Other trainees have actually mentioned that, so I don't feel it's just me. I feel singled out, and I'm sorry if I can't remember the things. It's really hard for me to remember them. Like, question is like, what do you like, is the stress of her expectations what makes you not remember it? I wonder, right? And just ask her to be more gracious and have more patience with you, and just say, I really I need to ask you to just be a little bit more patient with me. I know that I've been doing this for a long time. I have a hard time remembering it. Just be open and vulnerable, just right. As if it were so easy. But in this case, that you have been practicing with this teacher for 20 years, I am hoping that you can be honest and say how you feel. And like, if you can't do it with somebody who's been working for 20 years, then who can you do it with, right? I mean, maybe it's easier to do with somebody who you barely know. There's that. But I wonder if you have any idea of why she's doing it. Maybe, maybe she has high expectations, or maybe she feels like she needs to push you. People need different things, and maybe she's assuming that you need to be pushed, but you need different things, right? Um, we're emotional beings, and she might not be aware of it. So I would just say, have a conversation. Have a conversation, tell her how you're feeling. Try not make it accusatory. Like, don't make her feel bad about it. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt that she's just trying to challenge you in order to help you, which obviously I don't know. Maybe she's just a bitch. I doubt she's a bitch because you've been working with her for 20 years. And if she were a bitch, then you wouldn't be working with her for 20 years, I'm assuming. So just have a conversation. Might be stressful for you, but start with something positive, right? So like, whatever positive thing you can come up with, start with that before you come to the criticism. Good luck. Let me know how it goes. Kathleen is asking, for Cardio Sculpt classes, what are some new ways to jump and keep the class fun? Oh, I am the wrong person to ask this. So I believe Cardio Sculpt is a club Pilates thing. I've never taught jumping classes. And I know that there's a million creative ways to jump that I honestly don't know. So I'm sorry, I'm letting you down. Yeah, what can I say? That's just not my approach to Pilates. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just don't have much experience with it. And also, you're saying what are some new ways to jump, and I don't know what you are already doing, and I don't want to list all of the ways that you can jump. I would just take what I would do is, if I needed more ideas, there is to take classes with my colleagues. So if you are at Club Pilates, I'm assuming there are other Cardio Sculpt classes. I would just take their classes and learn from your colleagues. That's what I would do. And the one other thing I want to say is variety is overrated. If you feel that people are bored of doing the same thing, then they're not thinking of anything. So if you're not filling the movements with purpose and with intention and with a focus, then it stays on the surface. So fun is not the only thing that's in Pilates, right? Function and correct alignment and all of those things are equally important, if not more important than fun. I'll leave it at that. Leyla is asking, how do you know if you're doing the right level of cueing? I focus on setup and then give instructions on how to move. I know lots of other teachers give a lot more cues. Yeah, so I just talked about this, a similar thing. So you say you focus on the setup, that's great, and then give instructions on how to move, great. So I call this the setup and then the movement pattern. That's wonderful, or form, the form of the exercise. That's a great start. That's a wonderful start. And then, so most teachers, you say that a lot of other teachers give a lot more cues. Most teachers actually over cue. They say way too much. If you get bombarded with words as a student, you're not paying attention to anything anymore. And then it's like a whack-a-mole. Like you'd fix this and then you fix that, and your mind is jumping around from head to toe, and you're not really doing anything. You're not practicing anything. You're just randomly throwing your focus around. So you know what? Honestly, I think you're doing just fine. I would, I mean, make sure that you're not just make sure that you're not just cueing the setup and the movement pattern, but you're giving people something to think about with their alignment. But if you're giving one thing to think about in each exercise, that's all they need. That's all they can focus on anyway. So I would say you're fine. Monica's asking, cueing, oh, sorry. Thank you so much for all the great material provided in the membership. Oh, you're so welcome. I'm glad it's helping you. I wanted to know how to best cue the following exercises for clients: short spine versus long spine, as well as side plank on the mat and reformer. So short spine and long spine, or cueing, yeah, it's you have let me start with side plank. I think in side plank, it's all about the setup. You have to be super specific on where to put all the body parts before we lift up. Once you're up in the plank, you're not doing anything anymore, right? So now your muscles are just working to keep you in the position. But there's no more cueing from your end necessarily once they're already in the plank. So the one thing that matters is how to set up. So be really specific. Where are the feet? Are they dorsiflexed? Are they on the edge of the foot? Are the feet separate? Are they stacked? Those things. Where is the elbow in relationship to the shoulder? Where are they looking? Those things really matter. So the setup is much more important than the actual exercise. In all, that's actually true for every single exercise, but especially isometric things like a plank. Okay. Short spine versus long spine. So short spine is easier than long spine. So I would always start with short spine, teach that for a while, and then eventually try long spine. With every single exercise, teach the movement pattern first. So get them to just do the thing. Get them to move where they need to go. Legs go up overhead, hips lift, and then roll down. Knees parallel or turned out, knees towards shoulder rests, roll down. And I know I'm brushing this. And then because your feet are in the straps are part of the exercise. So the pressure, cue the pressure into the straps. Keep pushing your feet into the straps. For instance, I know this is a very general exercise. For long spine, the pressure in the straps is even more important. So they go straight up, and then as they slowly roll down, they have to keep more pressure in the straps to keep the feet above the sternum or above the hips, depending on where you want them, or further out. If you are a member, I would recommend you ask this question one more time in the membership if you really want to know short spine and long spine. So I think teaching advanced exercises, maybe I'll mention that, teaching advanced exercises or more intermediate, more complicated exercises, again, you can't teach everything at once. You have to get the person to first know the general form, the general shape. And then once they know that, you have to stop cueing that because you can't say everything in a short amount of time. So then you just tell them continue on your own, and then they continue moving. And you give them just one specific cue at the time when they need it. For instance, if they collapse, if they shorten their spine, they compress their spine and they collapse, then that's where you tell them reach your tailbone up to the ceiling so that they keep more of an elongated spine. So then all I'm saying, the next 3 repetitions, all I'm saying, just before they get to that moment, I say, as you bring your legs up overhead, reach your tailbone up to the ceiling, reach your tailbone up higher, higher, reach it up. That's all I'm saying. So I'm not repeating the same old, bring your legs overhead, roll your spine down, bend your knees to the shoulder rest, and roll down, right? You have to let go of one thing so that you have space to say something different. I hope that makes sense. This is, I think, a different Monica asking, I want to ask about cueing C curve on the box. So I'm assuming that is short box series round back. I'm thinking exercise I don't like. I rarely teach the round back version of the short box. I teach the flat back version all the time. I think it's not very hard. I think it's overcomplicated. There's so many exercises that you get way more bang for your buck than the round back. I think I would teach the C curve only with somebody who's very weak, who cannot do a flat back, because flat back requires strength. The round back doesn't require much strength. So I'm hoping that that's what you're talking about, first of all. And it's really weird to move the pelvis back with the legs stuck on the box. The C curve on the ladder barrel, 100%, I'm all for it. And sometimes I'm thinking, and I don't know this for sure, but sometimes I'm thinking, maybe the short box series, no, it wasn't first on, it was probably not first on the ladder barrel because it's called short box series, which indicates it has a box. I'm just trying to think where it might be coming from. And people might feel different, like people's bodies feel different in different exercises. So basically what the C curve is, no matter where you teach it, it's always a tip off of your sacrum, roll off, tip off of your tailbone, roll onto your sacrum in a posterior pelvic tilt. Navel to spine is a good cue for this one. That's all it is. That's all it is, not lifting the shoulders, keeping that relaxed, and then returning back up to a neutral position. It's no big deal. It's no secret there. I think we're so often, a lot of the Pilates exercises, we're mystifying them by trying to be them more than they are. It's a simple posterior pelvic tilt. That's all it is. I hope that's okay, Monica. I hope I'm not like, um, um, I can figure out how to say this. I don't want to take away from the value of Pilates at all, right? But again, I think we're overcomplicating it. If you know how to cue a C curve on the mat, you know how to cue a C curve on the box. There's no difference. So it's about, reaching the tailbone forward. It's about finding cues to teach a C curve. Where you are, it doesn't really matter so much. The one thing that I'll maybe throw out is if you're talking about the short box series on the reformer, I actually I have not learned it that way, but I'm starting to do it this way now all the time, is because it feels better for me, is I don't attach all of the springs. I only do 2 springs so that the carriage can move. And I actually push the carriage out. I actually straighten my legs as I move my pelvis. And that makes all the difference in the world. If I don't move the carriage and I only move my pelvis without straightening my legs, it feels really strange and weird to me. And maybe that's a lack of disassociation somewhere in my body. But that way it feels better. Try it. Maybe try it and see if that works better for you too. And maybe then the whole queuing situation is no issue anymore. So actually, I do need to say this because I need to say it at one point. And and I just wrote an article about this. I'll link it below. Sometimes queuing is not about queuing, or sometimes teaching, I should say, is not about queuing. It's about programming. So sometimes it's not about finding better words to say something, but it's about making sure that the client understands the movement skill that they have to do. And I might have to teach them a different exercise to understand the skill. And then they can do the exercise all on their own without me coming up with fancy words. Sometimes you can come up with a million ways to instruct the C curve, and people will still not get it because their body doesn't understand the movement. Not that their mind don't understand the words or they can't interpret the words, is that the body doesn't have the ability to do what you want them to do. I hope that makes sense. Echo. Whew, guys. Whew. I said this was going to be long. How do I progress my clients is a big question. Okay, I've been a member before and I really want to come back. Yes, I want you to come back. I think my biggest struggle right now is planning my classes because I do group classes and not everyone is doing the same thing. I would like for everyone to be doing the same thing, even if I'm doing a beginner, intermediate, and more advanced. When I'm putting my classes together after thinking about including moving our spine in all directions, how should I be putting exercise together? I always do a warm-up with arms and legs and abs. I do an arm series, a leg series, and more abs, and then cool down with stretching. How should I put together exercises for progression? I hope that makes sense. Maybe a better way to say it is, how do I build from one exercise to the next so my clients can see a difference and I can see differences in my clients? I'm not sure if you've ever felt that feeling of am I even progressing my client? And sometimes it's hard if you only see them once a week. Thank you for taking the time to respond to this message. Yes, I totally know what you mean. Yeah, 100%. So if you see somebody just once a week, you can be clear to them and to yourself, once a week is maintenance. If somebody comes to Pilates once a week, you cannot expect them to progress. You can only expect them to maintain the abilities that they have now. Okay? Very clear. If somebody comes twice a week, then you can start to progress. And then progressions, teaching Pilates is a long-term thing. So basically, when you have a client, you need to think, what is the next like, okay, this is what we're doing now. What are some exercises that I believe that I wouldn't teach them right now, but that I want them to do, and then figure out how to get there, right? So how can you build up to this more advanced exercise? Which movement skills do they need to improve so that they can do the next exercise? And then you just try and put those into the next program or classes over the next, the course of the next few weeks or months. So that's that. I guess it's several questions that you're having. How to put together a class, go to pilatesencyclopedia.com/template. You might already have this if you've been a member before, but it's also a free template. Anybody can download this. It's a template that tells you how to put together a class. So in terms of, you were talking about warm up and arms and legs, I break down classes by body position. So I start supine, then to prone, side lying, seated, quadruped, kneeling, and standing. Because that's logical in terms of the way we develop as children, but also the way that gravity acts on the body and the way that the amount of proprioception we get so we can learn better in the sequence. So that's how I put together a class, and the rest I'm not going to overthink, to be honest. Or I choose specific movement skills that I want to work on, and I choose exercises, and then I put them into the block where they belong. So that's how I put together a class. The first question that you have about you want everybody to do the same thing, even if you're doing beginner, intermediate, and advanced, I'm not quite understanding that, because people are different, and even in a group class, I actually think people shouldn't be doing the same thing. I know that that can get crazy. It can get out of hand if everybody's doing something different. Um, so yeah, I think I'm just having trouble understanding your question. Feel free to drop it into the comments if you want to clarify, and then I'm happy to answer. Okay, moving on. Becca. Where does it begin and end? Always learning. I know, isn't it? We need so much time to read and research in a busy working life. I know. Somebody spoke to me about breathing and the diaphragm and Venus return, and that made me think. I think my biggest bear bug is in all my years of teaching is planning. I teach many people across the week in the same classes and like to mix it up. Sometimes it flows, and other times it's like writer's block. I feel the same about planning reformer and math. Safety with injuries on the reformer, hip, knee, etc. Pregnant ladies on the reformer. Oh my goodness, so many questions. Becca, I don't know where to start either. Um, so in terms of, so you say you teach many people across a week in the same classes. So are you teaching private lessons or are you teaching group classes? And it actually doesn't matter. For private clients, every client, my clients, have a program, and we're working on their program. So I don't have to plan their class because I plan it the first time I meet them, and then I progress them. But progressions are very natural, clear. I don't have to plan this. I do this in the class, and then I make a note. So private lessons actually take much less planning than group classes if you do it right. And then you also see progress in your clients. If you just do something random every single time with a private client, how do you know that they're going to progress? You're never going to know, right? With classes, it's maybe slightly different, but also classes, I keep the same class sequence for at least a month. Because again, only if you repeat things, you're going to get better. And only if you repeat things, you're going to know that you're going to get better. And then you don't have to plan so much. And you can still throw in a few variations here and there, like choose a little longer lever, add a little rotation here and there. You can still add creativity without completely throwing, doing a completely different sequence and spending a ton of time planning. The whole mix it up, yeah, it's the thing. So mix it up with a focus. Instead of mixing up the movement, mix up what they think about. People get bored if they have nothing to think about. As soon as you give them something specific to think about, they're not bored anymore. So fill your movement, your form, your shapes with purpose by choosing a cue, by choosing, today we're really going to observe or experience and feel what our feet are doing in every single exercise, for instance. That's revolutionary. Every single exercise will feel like a completely new exercise, because now I'm paying attention how I'm in long stretch or I'm in knee stretch, and I'm paying attention to how my feet touch the shoulder rest or the headrest behind me. Completely different experience, because I'm always focusing on the core or my wrist or whatever, right? So if you give your client something to think about, then they will have a different experience. They will get better at the exercise, and you have less work on planning. Safety with injuries on a reformer, that's a really big question. I can't answer it. I don't know how to answer that. It's a huge question. Pregnant ladies on the reformer, all of the contraindications and precautions that you have for pregnancy obviously apply on the reformer. So, do a lot of standing, kneeling, sitting, side lying, obviously no prone, and very little supine, or if supine, then on a wedge. But other than that, go for it. Pregnant ladies are not sick unless they have some complications with the pregnancy, and then obviously they need to talk to you about it, or you need to ask them about it. But and their prior fitness level makes a huge difference. If somebody starts Pilates because they're pregnant and they have poor body awareness, that is completely different situation than somebody who's been working out their whole life, who's been taking Pilates for 10 years, and then they become pregnant. It's a completely different situation, right? So you need to think about the whole person, not just about the pathology. It's about the person, not the pathology. Or I know pregnancy is not a pathology. You know what I mean. That's also going to help you with the writer's block that you say. Sometimes it flows and sometimes it doesn't flow. Don't try and write something new every time. No, if you come into the class with a plan, you can still be flexible. You can still change it up in the moment. But then if you do change it up in the moment, it comes either out of inspiration or out of something you see, and that's going to be more purposeful, and then it's going to feel good. Then it's going to feel flowy, versus you not coming with a plan, and then you're under more stress, and then you need to then you can't react to the students in the room. Coming prepared is always a good idea. And I'm not saying that you not, right? And in terms of like research and reading, yes, I feel you. Yeah, there's so much to learn, and you could always like take a deep dive into one issue. That's why if any of you have been listening to this whole Ask Me Anything, which has been going on for way too long already, but if you have, then you've heard me admit on things that I don't know, exercises that I don't like, that I don't teach, because we can't do it all. We can't possibly know it all and do it all. And that's okay. And the moment that you're able to admit that to your students or your colleagues or whoever, the easier it will be. Like, it is a huge rock falling off your chest or your shoulders. And you can refer out, you can have them ask somebody else for advice on this particular issue. You don't have to know it all. So if you get a client, like the question that came up earlier about the client with the wheelchair bound client with MS, if I were to get a client like that, I would very, very immediately admit to that client, very openly admit to the client, I've never worked with somebody in a wheelchair before. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to do my homework and my research. And I know a lot about movement. But I don't have experience per se with it. And then I let the client decide if they want to work with me or not. I'm not going to put the pressure on me to try and fulfill somebody else's expectations if I think I might not. Okay. That's so important for your personal health. Same thing, for instance, with pregnancy. Actually, since it's coming up, I have no children. I've never been pregnant. I don't have experience with pregnancy. So I don't know it from firsthand experience. And I actually have not had a lot of people with a lot of pregnant women, like one or two. And maybe that's why. Maybe because you know how we like attracts like, how we attract the people that we are appropriate for. I believe in that. So maybe that's why. So throughout my whole teaching experience, I really don't have a lot of experience with pregnancy. So of course I can, if I had a client, I would do my best, but I would also openly say, look, this is it. I don't have too much experience. I leave it up to you. I can try and find a teacher that has more experience for you, or if I'm the only one around, I'll do my very best and I'll do my homework, and then I'll learn, right? And then I'll have had the first, or I'll have a little bit more of experience, and that's just how it goes. And then hopefully we're going to be teaching for many, many years, because then we accumulate a huge knowledge over time with experience. We learn, and again, I mentioned this also earlier, I can't memorize anything. I don't remember anything by just reading about it. I learn 1% at a time with a real person. Like I remember, okay, I don't want to say any names, but whatever, Patty, which is not her name, she's the hypermobile one. And I remember she always did that. So then that's how I remember how to work with hypermobile people and recognizing that every single person who's hypermobile is different. Or this other client, so with specific clients and their issues, that's how I learn. And that's how I think many of us learn, right? That's how it's lasting learning, not just book learning. Guys, one more question. This is the last one. I believe the name is Torunn. I don't know if I say this correctly. I apologize. Um, Thank you for this opportunity. You're so welcome. I will definitely take advantage of it. Here it is. You seem extremely knowledgeable and skilled. Oh, that's so sweet of you. I just mentioned all of the things that I don't know. I've often wondered why in Pilates we don't encourage inward rotation of the femurs when doing extension work. In yoga, this is one of the first things you learn for the sake of the nutation of the sacrum. Thanks in advance. So, um, it's so funny that you say that because I've done one yoga training and I did not specifically learn that, and I would actually doubt that in most yoga trainings you hear that. But the one that you did, I guess, or the where you either did your yoga training or where you practice yoga, that's you do learn it there, and that's great. It's the weirdest thing. Each modality in the movement world focuses on one aspect, and Pilates is all about the core, even though it's not just about the core, but that's what it's famous for. And Pilates teachers are always, if they don't know what to say, they're going to cue the abdominals just in case, because it's always about the abdominals when it's not. So each so the answer is I don't know why not. It's because Pilates has been taught traditionally. So the way that we learn Pilates is because by repeating and copying what our teachers did and taught us. Okay. Only now I think are we slowly entering the phase where we're coming to Pilates movement with science and or like with more of like maybe a personal like a fitness background or something like that. Um, and and I think maybe some styles in yoga they have done that earlier. So that's not a traditional thing either, right? Like I think actually I don't know. Maybe Mr. Iyengar knew about the internal rotation and he did that. I don't know because he was very alignment based, right? So I don't know why yoga focuses specifically on this thing. Maybe because I think there's more extension in yoga than there is in Pilates. We do so much flexion in Pilates. So much of our cueing is about flexion, but it's unbalanced. It's unbalanced, right? And in yoga, there's a lot of extension, and maybe it's too much, and that is unbalanced. But the more we do the same thing, the better we get at that thing. So, and the more research is done into it, like, so that's the explanation I have. Can you cue internal rotation of the femur during extension work in Pilates? 100%, of course. Like that's why I said earlier on, getting another education in a slightly different field is actually super helpful. So I also did a yoga training and I did some group fitness and stuff like that training. And each training from a different field that you take gives you a new lens to look at movement. And then you combine all of that and it makes you a much better teacher of whatever modality you're teaching, because you're not just looking through this tiny little lens and yeah, and have this limited view, but you see all the options. And I think that's fantastic. So go for it. Like whatever you learn in other modalities, bring it into your Pilates and teach it. And then the more you do it, the more your teachers or your students, whoever you teach, will progress. And over time it'll spread. And thanks to now that it's in here and it's on the interwebs, maybe other teachers will start using it. And help people free up their sacrum, which is wonderful, right? So there's that. That's it, guys. Let's see. Let me look at the time. it, I actually don't see how long we've been recording, but I think it's been at least 2 hours. So this has been great. I hope you guys got all your answers. If there is some follow-up, drop it into the comments below the video. And I obviously encourage all of you to join me inside the Pilates Encyclopedia. It's like seriously for the price of like half a reformer class, you can ask me unlimited questions all month long and I'll answer them all. And there's so much information already in there, so you might not even have to answer any of these questions. And you might have been able to tell that the same questions come up all the time. All the teachers have the same questions. So, you're not alone, and we have answers for all of this. And you'll feel that there's a whole tribe here of like-minded folks who are in the same situation. And we're here to help you out and to make you a happier and more experienced, more confident teacher. All right. Again, hope that was helpful. I'll see you another time. Take care.